welcome to the Quotive Corner. Today's quote comes from someone who spent decades standing over a golf ball with a major championship on the line, millions of people watching, and absolutely no room for error. If anyone has earned the right to speak on the relationship between focus and nerves, it's him. Concentration is a fine antidote to anxiety. That's Jack Nicklaus, widely considered the greatest golfer in the history of the sport. 18 major championship victories, a competitive career that spanned 5 decades, and a mental game that other professionals have spent just as much time studying as his swing. This line comes from The Shortcuts to Lower Scores, a 1990 instructional book he co-wrote with Ken Bowden. And Nicklaus returned to this exact idea elsewhere in his writing, putting it even more precisely. The biggest tension reliever in golf, or any sport for that matter, is confidence, and the second biggest, available to anyone, is concentration. So, what is he actually describing? Antidote is a precise word, and Nicklaus chose it deliberately. An antidote doesn't just relieve a symptom, it counteracts a poison directly. It works on the same mechanism that's causing the harm, neutralizing it rather than masking it. Nicklaus is making a specific claim. Anxiety and concentration aren't just two unrelated mental states that happen to coexist poorly. They are functionally incompatible. Wherever real concentration is occupying the mind, anxiety has nowhere left to live. Think about what anxiety actually requires to operate. It needs attention directed toward an uncertain future, toward outcomes that haven't happened yet and might go badly. It needs mental space to run scenarios, replay worst cases, and rehearse failure before it occurs. Anxiety is, in a very real sense, a parasite on bandwidth. It cannot exist without occupying some portion of your attention, because anxiety is itself a form of attention, just one pointed at threat rather than task. Concentration, when it's genuine, occupies that exact same bandwidth. And here's the mechanism Nicklaus is pointing at. The mind, despite how it sometimes feels, doesn't actually multitask attention in the way we assume. You cannot be completely absorbed in the present mechanics of a task, the lie of the putt, the line of the shot, the specific muscle memory required for this specific swing, while simultaneously running a parallel simulation of everything that could go wrong if you miss. The two states compete for the same limited resource, and when one is fully occupying that resource, the other gets crowded out. This is why Nicklaus elsewhere described concentration as something that blocks out pressure entirely. Not reduces it, blocks it. He said directly, if you make mistakes and look for excuses, you lose your concentration and feel pressure. Notice the causality in that sentence. The losing of concentration comes first. The feeling of pressure follows it. Pressure isn't an external force pressing in from the tournament, the crowd, or the stakes. It's what rushes into the space the moment concentration stops occupying it. That reframes the entire problem. Most people experience anxiety as something imposed on them by circumstances. The big presentation, the important conversation, the high-stakes decision. And then search for ways to calm down, breathe through it, talk themselves out of the fear. Nicklaus is offering something more actionable than calming down. He's offering a redirection of where your attention goes. Not less anxious thinking, more task-absorbed thinking. The anxiety doesn't need to be defeated in direct combat. It just needs to be denied the room it requires to operate. Consider what this looks like outside of golf, because the mechanism is identical anywhere performance and pressure intersect. The surgeon in the middle of an operation isn't managing fear about the outcome while also cutting. The ones who perform best are fully absorbed in the present technical task, and the worry about the result, if it exists at all, exists somewhere outside the working portion of their attention. The musician walking onto a stage who is completely inside the music, inside this phrase, this note, this transition, has displaced the anxiety about the audience's judgment simply by filling the available space with something else. The student in a difficult exam who drops fully into the problem in front of them rather than the larger fear of failing the whole test finds that the larger fear has nowhere to attach itself in that moment. This connects to something practical and slightly counterintuitive. The solution to anxiety, in Nicklaus's framing, isn't necessarily found by addressing the anxiety directly. It's found by going all the way into the task that anxiety is interrupting. Trying to talk yourself out of fear while still standing outside the work, looking at it from a distance, tends to keep the anxious mind fed precisely because it remains in observer mode, watching itself, evaluating itself, worrying about itself. Concentration requires stepping inside the task completely enough that there's no longer a vantage point left from which to worry. Nicklaus described this in vivid detail elsewhere in his writing, explaining that he never hit a shot, not even in practice, without holding a sharp, specific picture of it in his mind first. Where the ball would finish, its trajectory, its behavior on landing, and only then the swing that would turn that picture into reality. That is concentration as a discipline, not an accident. It's a constructed mental state, built deliberately, shot after shot, for decades. It didn't arrive naturally, even for one of the most mentally disciplined competitors in the history of the sport. He built it as a practice. That's the part of this quote that deserves real attention. Concentration is not simply the absence of distraction. It is an active, trainable skill, the capacity to fully occupy your own attention with the present task rather than the surrounding stakes. And like any trained skill, it improves specifically through repetition, not through willpower applied in the moment it's needed most. Nicklaus wasn't more naturally calm than his competitors. He built, through relentless practice, a mind that knew exactly where to go under pressure, because it had gone there 10,000 times before in far less consequential moments. Now, the honest counterpoint, because this show doesn't skip it. Concentration is not a universal solvent for every form of anxiety. Some anxiety is appropriately responsive to genuine danger or genuine moral stakes, and the correct response to that kind of anxiety is not to concentrate it away, but to actually address the underlying issue. A person anxious about a relationship that's quietly deteriorating doesn't need better concentration on something else. They need to have the hard conversation. Nicklaus is speaking specifically to performance anxiety, the kind that arises not from a real unresolved problem, but from the mind projecting forward into outcomes it cannot control in the present moment. That's an important distinction. Concentration is an antidote to anxious anticipation about a task. It is not a substitute for actually solving a real problem that anxiety is correctly flagging. With that distinction in place, the practical instruction holds up well. The next time you feel anxiety rising before something that genuinely requires your performance, a conversation, a presentation, a difficult task, the answer Nicklaus is offering isn't to fight the anxiety directly. It's to go all the way into the actual work in front of you, not the stakes, not the audience, not the outcome. The work itself, in this exact moment, fully occupying the only space anxiety needs to survive. 18 major championships were won, shot by shot, inside that exact discipline. Thanks for spending a few minutes here at the Quotive Corner. If this one gives you something to reach for next time the nerves show up before something that matters, that's exactly the point. As always, wisdom isn't in the quote, it's in the reflection. I'll catch you in the next episode.